house? And he's like, oh, you need to move some furniture. Let me help you. And he's like, oh, we don't let niggas in the house. I was just like,
Yeah.
wait, hold on. I was like, I was not prepared for. I knew something was coming. That was like, all right, we got another one. Another push play coming at you, straight to your face. I don't know why I have to make it sound so graphic, but it's graphic.
I like it.
Damn it, I have the wrong title for the fucking film. That was another press play we did. But
yeah,
I can change
that was a film we did. What was that, last week?
Yeah, we did that last week. But yeah,
really good movie.
Look, we're doing this press play on One Night in Miami, which is of course directed by Regina King and written by Kemp Powers. Both the screenplay, Kemp Powers wrote the screenplay, but also this was actually a stage play, which actually it feels every bit of a stage play. I was watching with my significant other, and the first thing that she said, like maybe 20 minutes into the movie, was like, "Oh, this feels like a play," because we've watched a few movies now in a row that were previously stage plays, and you could notice the difference, right? What's the movie that we did with who's the dude from Jim Parsons?
The Boys in the Band.
All the Boys in the Band. So we watched that. Yeah. That was a stage play. There was another one more recently that I think just randomly watched. Anyways,
The Argument.
Yeah. So while I change the title for this, because we are not doing the press play on Pieces of a Woman. What do you find about this film? Just like we always do, we start off by talking about what we find relatable about the movies. Talk to me about One Night in Miami. What did you find relatable about One Night in Miami?
Well, I've got a couple One Night in Miami stories. So, just that right there, it made me reminisce. I was like, oh, I remember. If you don't have, I remember that One Night in Miami. If you don't have one of those stories, go get you one. You deserve it. you survived 2020. Go get yourself a One Night Miami story. They're always great. Some of them are bad. Like if you got some like bad Molly, you just we won't get into that. Go get yourself a good One Night Miami story. So that's one of the things that like really attracted me to this movie. It's just kind of nostalgic, right? Miami's a beautiful city. But this is a Regina King film, and she's had, over the past few years, she's just been a force to reckon with. And I loved a lot of the work that she's put out. I love the projects that she's been a part of. Even her, I think she's like the creative director of like Cadillac now. She's directed a few of Cadillac's more recent commercials, like the Escalade and some of their newer vehicles. I think she's done some really interesting work on those projects as well. She's just been rolling. So, when I found out that she was directing this film, like, okay, I need to see this project. And I think the story is just so interesting. What if you were a fly on the wall in a room with Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, Cassius Clay, and Jim Brown, right? What if you were in that room that one night in Miami? Just the concept, the story here, I just thought it was really interesting. And I was really excited to see this film.
Yeah. So what I found relatable about the movie, man, is just with all the questions, man, that were brought up in it, man. There's just so many different aspects to this film that obviously we'll jump into the plot and what we think about that. But just from kind of like immediate reactions, man, kind of the dynamic between, you had Malcolm X, right, in the film, who was basically more distrusting of, more weary of somebody like Sam Cooke, who, more came from the standpoint of, okay, hey, capitalism, bitch, like let's get this money while we can, and let's do it however we fucking can, where Malcolm X was talking about more of, liberation and things like that for the Black community. But, I think, Jim Brown, his, the character, I guess, in the movie said it best, where he was like, well, you can't really be liberated until you have that economic, freedom. So I find myself caught, in that, in that thought pattern of, you can't really be, free until you're economically free, and so the big question is, well, how do you do that? And I found myself, very I find myself on a consistent basis thinking about those type of questions, about, okay, well, what do you put your efforts more towards too, about making yourself economically free, or doing kind of like the grassroots efforts in order to, uh, you know, push your community forward in order to or maybe it's both, maybe it's a combination of both of those things, and in fact that's probably where the answer lies, is somewhere in between. And so yeah, and so that's what I really found relatable about the movie. But let's jump into the plot of the film. Let's talk about how we felt about the plot of 190 Miami.
So, you know, as I mentioned before, right, this film very much a play style film, as the majority of the film takes place in just a single room, a single hotel room in Miami. And I forget what exactly that hotel was, but I want to go back and I want to find that out. It'd be really interesting the next time that I'm in Miami. Hopefully that's soon when it's safe to travel. So I kind of go back, find that place and go see it, see what it looks like today. But you have Malcolm X, Cassius Clay, Sam Cooke, as well as Jim Brown, all very prominent African American men during this particular time, all at like the top of their fields, so to speak, and all of them taking a somewhat different approach to, like not necessarily liberation, but improving the quality of lives for Black men and women in America, right? Jim Brown does it by using his platform in sports. Muhammad Ali does it by using his platform in boxing. Cassius, Sam Cooke in music. Muhammad Ali he's a speaker. He's a social rights political advocate, right? So they're all kind of like clashing and trying to decide like whose method is best, like who's right, who's wrong. Not necessarily like fighting with each other, but like some of them have their disagreements. Obviously, we saw a lot of Malcolm X disagreeing with Sam Cooke, in that he thought Sam Cooke was somewhat of an Uncle Tom, playing, singing and jiving and dancing for the white man, and where he should be more militant and he should use his platform to really be like more of a freedom fighter, right? So it's this story of tensions and struggles within the Black movement, within the Black experience and the Black struggle during this particular time. And you have in this room, in this was one night, this long conversation of these very prominent figures trying to figure out like who's right, who's wrong. Is nobody right or wrong? And there are many ways to skin the cat, I think is the saying. So for me, this is a story about like tension, but positive tension that like creates, positivity long term. So I just thought the story was really unique. I just thought it was again, to have been a fly on the wall in that room. If this conversation were to actually have taken place, it would have been a very interesting experience. And like what all of those men learned from that night, theoretically, I think that it would have been a very powerful thing.
Yeah. So I thought that this was it was a mixed bag for me as far as like the plot for the film goes. And the reason why I say that is because it was as if it's kind of like the movie to me didn't know what it wanted to be. On one hand, you have these iconic Black, men who like sure, and you could, you don't have to sell that too hard to everybody. Like, what would if we had Sam Cooke, Jim Brown, Malcolm X, and Muhammad Ali, or I guess Cassius Clay, at that point in time, all in a room and just talking, to each other because they're friends. What would that conversation go like? Yeah, you don't have to try hard to sell that, right? But it was as if the movie didn't know whether it wanted to stick with that or the more broader themes about, being Black in America, right? And the reason why I say that is because when we start off the movie, we don't really get any pretext to like why they're all friends, how they became friends or like anything like that. We just kind of jump right into the story, jump right into them in this one night. And so you never really establish like basically like a good like rapport between them of like, oh, okay, I see why these guys are friends, or I know a little bit of backstory here. I know why this is happening. And really the movie to me was carried by this sort of at the beginning they kind of teased this thing with Malcolm X, and this is when he's basically about to leave the Nation of Islam. And and they make it so that that was kind of like the focal point of the movie, meaning that was like the big reveal, towards the end of the movie of, Malcolm's going to leave the Nation of Islam. And of course, this was coincided with Muhammad Ali or Cassius Clay deciding he wanted to convert to Islam, and obviously then be Muhammad Ali. And so that big reveal is what was supposed to sort of cause sort of like a rift. That's what we were waiting for. But it felt kind of like, it felt like out of place when we got to it, because it was just like, oh, I didn't really care about this anymore. But it's like, because it's like at the end of the movie, and you really like, they spend like a good like 10 minutes on it, and then that's it. And then because Muhammad Ali at that point he's angry with Malcolm, but then like 2 seconds later he's like, that's fine, come on, let's go do this interview real quick. And it's just like, oh, okay, so that really wasn't that like important of a thing. But with the way that they tease it at the beginning, so I was like, I would have rather either us to focus on just the relationships and then, organically sort of find out about all these issues that they're having with a larger issue of being Black in America, especially a Black man in America. Stick with that, and stick with like their relationships, or make it kind of all based around sort of like a bigger sort of like reveal or something like that. Make it more of like a mystery kind of thing about like what I spent. And the reason why I'm saying all this is because, dude, like literally about like halfway through the movie, I was like, I don't really know what this movie's about. Like I get the obvious reasons, for the movie, but when I'm looking at it plot wise, I was like, I don't really understand like what the thing is that we're supposed to be focusing on in this movie. It felt like it just a scattershot of just random shit. But I feel weird about it because I still like the movie, weirdly enough. Usually when I say anything that comes close to that, it's usually followed by, and I hated it, but no, all the characters, they were engaging, man. And I would say that this movie was really, you could tell that this was from a stage play because it really was carried by the performances of the actors. Like,
absolutely.
If it weren't for that, I don't think I could say that I really appreciated this movie. And honestly, that's not even weird enough. I don't even want to talk ill of Regina King. I don't even think I think it's weirdly how like the movie's constructed. So it's either between how it was written or how it was interpreted from how the movie itself was written, that I think kind of leaves me a little wanting for more. But I can't really speak ill of her. I think she made good directions, but I think when you look at the overall plot of the film, that's where I kind of like, I'm like, like what's really going on here? But yeah.
I mean, I gotta agree with you. Like when I say this movie, like there was it's like kind of like this tense, what was supposed to be a fun night that turns into like a tense debate / argument / conversation between these four men. When I say like the tension, and I also agree with you that it was kind of hard to figure out exactly what this movie wanted to be. Like, is this about? Is this like a more of a political movie where like these four men who became these big figures, these big political civil rights figures, are trying to figure out like how do we move forward, how do we work together, or how do we take our four different methods and maybe combine it together to unify, right? Or is it just like, hey, we're all going to take our own different paths? Or is this movie really just about these four men in the hotel room having an interesting conversation one night in Miami, right? Like, what was this movie really supposed to be? I don't know. But as you said, the characters' performances really carry this film. Maybe that's what it was supposed to be. Four really strong, iconic characters or iconic men in a room together one night in Miami. Maybe that's all it was supposed to be. But to your point, either way, even though I don't exactly know what this movie was like, what the goal of it was, what the end game of it was, I still enjoyed it. It was slightly like underwhelming because I was expecting some big reveal at the end, right? I was expecting something major to happen, something like unexpected, and I didn't get that. So that part was underwhelming. But to your point, again, the character performances were so strong. With that said, let's jump into that part, right?
Yeah. I should say, mention the casting by credit on this film is Kimberly Hardin. But go ahead and say what you're about to say.
No, I was gonna say, in terms of the cast, who who's your MVP? Who are your runner ups? And just to go through the cast member again, Kingsley Ben-Adir played Malcolm X. We've got Eli Gore, who played Cassius Clay. Aldis Hodge played Jim Brown. We know Aldis Hodge from, we know more recently from, was it Aquaman?
I think he was in Aquaman. No, that wasn't Hodge. That was the dude from the new Candyman movie. Damn, I forget what his name is.
Okay, you know what? We know him from like Hidden Figures. He was in Die Hard, Straight Outta Compton, and I think he's doing a movie with The Rock pretty soon. Black Adam. I think he's going to be in Black Adam as well.
Black Adam. We talked about it.
So he's been doing some work, and then we have Leslie Odom Jr. who plays Sam Cooke. But who's your runner-up and who's your MVP?
Yeah. So I will have to say that, in kind of thinking about that idea of like, runners up and MVPs, I think you can give it to like pretty much like anybody. All the characters, did such a great job, in the movie. But I will say that my runner up, I think it has to be Aldis Hodge. And one of the main reasons is when I've seen him in a few different things, and usually I think I sometimes think that his characters can kind of get or Aldis Hodge is what I'll say. This is obviously his name. What I can say is that he sort of like kind of plays the same person each time. No matter what the role is, he kind of always is that person. He sort of is the same with this character where he played Jim Brown. Who's and obviously like an actual person. But I will say that when he spoke, I was like, oh shit, that's Jim Brown right now. He sounds slam like fucking Jim Brown. I'll be damned, And so it was just really great to see him kind of step into that role, and really own it. I think he was, every bit of Jim Brown as anybody else, could have been, and I really did appreciate it. And he had so many like little one-liners that he delivered perfectly well. And I would say, honestly, probably the most shocking part of the movie was a scene that we just saw flash on the screen. But to describe it to everybody, obviously, and hopefully you've seen the movie with us dropping so many fucking spoilers and shit. But one of the shocking moments of the film, man, was when he was visiting the old white dude, and then the old white dude's so nice and all this, and all of a sudden he's like, oh, you want me to? He goes into the old white dude goes into the house, and he's like, oh, you're you need to move some furniture. Let me help you. And he's like, oh, we don't let niggas in the house. I was just like, wait, hold on. I was not prepared for that. I knew something was coming. That was like, all right, this dude's a little too friendly, and there's a little bit of tension there. You can kind of sense it. It was all too good to be true. And then it was, but it was shocking. And just that whole scene, I think, was set up really well from Aldis Hodge in the way that he portrayed it. And that was his like first scene, that he had in a movie, and it was fantastic. So I'll give him my runner up. My MVP, I think it just has to be Kingsley Ben-Adir. For one, I've seen him in a few different things. Have you watched High Fidelity with Zoe Kravitz on Hulu?
No, I've not seen it yet.
Yeah, so he's in that. I didn't think he was particularly great in that, but that's kind of like one of the things I know him from. I do remember him from, I know you remember the OA.
Yes. Who did he play in the OA?
He was the black guy in season 2. Yeah, pretty quintessential, but or I guess token.
I kind of sort of.
He's like
remember.
The detective guy.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I like him as the detective.
So I've known him from a few different things, but I think, and with everybody talking about like, oh, these British actors, why are all these roles going to them? And I love Regina King's response to that, and it was very blunt, which is he was the best person for the job, and and it's when you watch the movie, you're like, okay, yeah. I can see what you're saying, because he fucking, I think he knocked it out of the park as Malcolm X. Now I will say that it was my first time seeing Malcolm X in the light that they portrayed him, so it was a little jarring. Usually, in watching both movies as well as from books and things like that, you get a sense of who Malcolm X was. But this was the first time I've kind of seen him painted in this very sort of like vulnerable light, and honestly kind of a manipulative light, where he basically has all the guys come through, but he's not really forthcoming about like exactly like what he's looking forward to out of that night. But I can't say enough about how Kingsley Ben-Adir, um, uh, about his turn as Malcolm X. He was the best person for the job. Like he was Malcolm X for that such a time. At least so far as I know, I didn't know Malcolm X to nobody's surprise. You know, I didn't know him personally, but I will say that I really did appreciate his performance as Malcolm X. I thought he did a fantastic job with it. How about you?
So for me, I got to give my runner up to Aldous Hodge as Jim Brown. I think to your point, like he put on that, the suit of that character very well. That opening scene where he goes to visit that like old white guy on the porch, and I don't know who that guy was. Was he like the mayor or somebody? He was someone important in that town or that city where Jim Brown was from. As soon as I saw him, he presented himself as Jim Brown. Like to me, like he transformed into the character, and I didn't even think about him in any other roles from any other films that I've seen him in. Like his voice, his dictation, and Jim Brown. At this point, he was like the number one athlete in the NFL. He was a running back for the Cleveland Browns.
Look, he had. And if I can toss in real quick, he was fucking yoked up too. I mean, like we never actually really get to see him, but like he looked like he was fucking swole for the role.
I mean,
so I'll throw that in.
He's a professional football player, running back, right? So he had to physically, he also had to look the part, right? So I would imagine, and Aldous Hodge, he's not like a small guy. We've seen him in like other, somewhat action roles, right? And we know he's also going to be in Black Adam opposite Dwayne Johnson. So I would imagine he's been in the gym both for this movie and for that movie. So he looked the part. The thing that stood out the most to me was like his dictation, his how he vocalized his lines, right? He really sounded like Jim Brown, this like powerful, profound, quiet, and like not necessarily like smoldering, like he was Jim Brown. If you ever seen his interviews or his movies, or like he doesn't say much, but when he speaks, it's powerful, and he really did that well in this movie. So he was my runner-up. My MVP is not necessarily the character that had the most screen time, the character that had the most like complexity or dynamics. My MVP for this is, for me, the character who I believe was the most likable and presented what I thought was like one of the most compelling arguments for like why they were who they were and why they were going the path that they were, right? Because I really just look at this movie as a conversation between four men who have taken different paths and different routes in life to become get to the point where they were, and four men that are going to continue down four different paths, but at the end of the day they have the same goal. My MVP goes to was it Leslie Odom Jr., who plays Sam Cooke. The music that he brought to this film was very, some of my favorite songs. I love Sam Cooke's music. I love what he did in the music industry to like really like amplify African-American voices, African-American musicians. So I like him as a person outside of this movie. I liked how Leslie Odom Jr. portrayed Sam Cooke in this film. And I really like the argument that he made towards the end of, like owning music, owning his masters. And like, while he wasn't going like the civil rights activist, the by any means necessary route that Malcolm X was going, he was going to create opportunities for, Black and men and women through economic empowerment, right? So I liked his argument. I liked how he portrayed that character. I like his delivery. I liked his sound. I like the music that he brought to the movie. So he gets my MVP. But to your point, Kingsley Ben-Adir, who played Malcolm X, I mean, I thought he obviously he's the best man for the job. I can't think of anybody else who I would like to have seen this to see, portray Malcolm X. I kind of wanted to give it to at least give my runner up to the actor who played so Eli Gore, who played Cassius Clay. But for me, there were several times in the movie where he like broke character, where I didn't feel like he was Cassius Clay, whether it was like through his mannerisms or through the voice, because Muhammad Ali or Cassius Clay has a very distinct voice, and there were some times throughout this movie I feel like he broke that, and so I couldn't give it to him, but I still think he had a great performance as well.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about the cinematography of the film real quick, as well as like the music. The cinematography credit for the film is Tammy Riker, and the film is edited by Tariq Anwar. So I love the cinematography of the film. I will say that it was every bit. It was shot, again, basically like it was like a stage play. That's how it felt, and it felt like that, there wasn't too much that jumped off the page to me in terms of any sort of like new techniques or anything like that were used. I think everything was pretty dope. I will say that the one underwater scene with where and I believe that's an actual real event that actually happened, was Muhammad Ali's underwater scene. That was pretty fucking dope. Seeing that iconic image there. But yeah, but outside of that, man, I didn't really think too much jumped off the page for me, visually for the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you there, right? Like, this is a movie that was meant to look and feel like a play. So there's not really much you could do in terms of like dynamic cinematography with this, right? It needs to look and feel like a play. The majority of the film took place in the hotel room. So the only thing you really had to achieve there was to make sure you capture as much of the characters like in a single shot that you can, right? To make it really feel like you're in a room with these four men and they're all having a conversation. I think they did that well. There were some really interesting moments. I think the Muhammad Ali fight, I think they captured that well. It really felt like a boxing match. And you got a real good taste for like, what it may have been like to be at a Muhammad Ali fight, what it may have been to be in Muhammad Ali's corner, where he's very charismatic. He's very, he's got the showmanship. He's funny, those moments were fun. I liked the character Leslie Odom Jr., who plays Sam Cooke. He really sold that character to me. I liked the performances. I liked the music. So I think cinematography was, it was done tastefully, and mission accomplished, right? Like they really accomplished that goal of like making this feel like a play.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as far as like music goes, or the soundtrack, the music by credit for the film is credited to Terrence Blanchard. Again, from a music standpoint, I think it's obviously, there's a lot of Sam Cooke presence, obviously, because he was a musician and he's one of the four major characters in the film. And so we got a heavy dose of a lot of his music. But the one that obviously of note is A Change Is Going to Come, which was significant to the film. The song, both with its words, but then also with that it's basically we sort of end on that note, and so yeah, outside of that, I didn't think didn't really do too many other crazy things. I will say that they did give it the music, that especially once they sort of get to like the hotel and all that, it did give it a lighter note, right? You kind of knew that this wasn't going to be like a brooding type of movie or something where we're going to be dealing with some crazy things. And honestly, I probably should have known at that point we weren't in for any like major crazy like reveals, because the music didn't really indicate that. It indicated a more of a lighter note, more of a I'm not going to say not serious, but more of a almost like a whimsical kind of movie, in that case. So I think that's what the actual that's what the soundtrack sort of dictated as we sort of approach that sort of like the main scene where we were in the hotel room with them. But again, aside from that, I didn't really think anything was too too wild with.
Yeah, I mean, I echo pretty much everything that you said. A lot of Sam Cooke in this movie. The music was intentional. It was supposed to be like very background, right? Very secondary. Really, it was just supposed to be like noise to give texture and flavor to the scene, but really like the conversations that these men were having was supposed to be prominent. It wasn't supposed to be compromised at all by any type of like sound effects or music. So I think that was done well. Other than when Sam Cooke's when his character character really came to the forefront, like when the conversation was about him, or that scene was about him, or that moment was about him. They amplified his music, of course. Other than that, the music was what it was supposed to be, like background.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that we've summed everything up that we can. The last notes that I'll say about the film is, there were some iconic, like this actually was a night that actually happened, that they actually did get together, and they did, Vanilla Ice Cream was a very major sort of point of emphasis in the film, and that did apparently happen. But obviously with, in movies like this, you downplay some events that might actually happen in that case, and then you amplify some others that maybe didn't. Maybe you embellish a little bit on some of those cases. So apparently this film is a little bit of a mixed bag when it comes to what was true and what wasn't true. A decent amount of it did happen, which is super fucking interesting to think of. But there's still like a lot of liberties that were taken with it. I what I can't shake the feeling of, man, is that I felt like the movie, I still liked it, but I think the idea of it, like there being like an actual, like, oh my gosh, like something's going to happen in this that's kind of like earth shattering. You always feel it simmering in the movie, despite what what the music might tell you, or despite what the plot might tell you. You felt like it was something that was like, oh man, something's coming, and then it never really comes, and you're just like, oh, okay, well, that's disappointing, but okay. I wish they would have rewritten it or redone it where that wasn't the feeling, or that something like that was actually in the movie. That's really my only, like, criticisms of it. I think outside of that, it's a perfectly fine turn from Regina King. I think, man, I think the world of her, man. I've been such a big fan of hers, all the way back in her Friday days, or her Poetic Justice days. I think she's had such a long career, and maybe a little bit underappreciated, I guess, in Hollywood, in terms of both her longevity as well as just how good she's been in, man. From Friday and Poetic Justice to all the way to Watchmen, man. She's done so much, and she's been great in fucking all of it, and so I think she really is underappreciated, both for myself as well as I think Hollywood in general. So this clearly is not the last we'll see of her as a director, and I want to see more from her, man.
Yeah, I mean, my last words, I think this is going to be a great film in Regina King's catalog, right? Like, this is a really interesting story. It was done really tastefully. It was shot in a very unique way. Again, this play style film. I feel like the casting for this film was appropriate. It was tasteful. I like the texture, the cinematography, the music was great. Overall, this is just a really good film. I am left with that feeling that I was like slightly underwhelmed, because you're waiting for something big to happen, right? What I would love to have seen towards the end is going from the night to, from this like night that these four men are in the hotel in Miami to maybe how their lives diverged or converged after Malcolm X's assassination, right? Like, how did that night in Miami impact these men after that, right? I would have loved to have seen maybe a fast forward, because I think he was assassinated like a year later.
Who, Malcolm X?
Malcolm X, yeah.
I don't. Yeah, it wasn't too long after that. I think it was 65.
Yeah, so I mean, I know towards the credits of the end of the movie, they give the the details about, like, I think Muhammad Ali or Malcolm X did an interview where he was like, this is a time for martyrs, and I feel like I will become one. And then I think 2 days after that interview, he was assassinated, but it was just like a year after that night in Miami. So I'd have loved to have seen, like, did the three men ever get back together and discuss that night, right? Or how did that night impact the rest of their lives? And we never got that. But again, this movie, that's not a knock on the film. This movie was still great, and I highly recommend anybody, if you have Amazon Prime, absolutely watch this movie. If you don't, and you're thinking about getting it, this is a good reason to get it.
Yeah. Either way, we press play on One Night in Miami. Let us know what you think about it once you've had a chance to press play on it. We assume you already did, since you just listened to all of that. But drop a comment in the comment section below. Let us know how you felt about the movie. Did you like it? Did you whatever you thought about the movie, just let us know.
Whatever you thought about it.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So from a very